Hey, hi everyone. And I'm not recording the cameras because I don't know how to do that. Maybe next time. I'm Łukasz. I'm with Rudi today, and we will be reading Freud's The Unconscious essay.
Yeah, we will do that. You will begin so I can eat
I
because I
will.
just got
I
up.
will do that. That's a good. That's good. Okay. The unconscious. We have learned from psychoanalysis that the essence of the process of repression lies not in putting an end to, in annihilating the idea which represents an instinct, but in preventing it from becoming conscious. When this happens, we say of the idea that it is in a state of being unconscious, and we can produce good evidence to show that even when it is unconscious, it can produce effects, even including some which finally reach consciousness. Everything that is repressed must remain unconscious. But let us state at the very outset that the repressed does not cover everything that is unconscious. The unconscious has the wider compass. The repressed is a part of the unconscious. How are we to arrive at the knowledge of the unconscious? It is, of course, only as something conscious that we know it, after it has undergone transformation or translation into something conscious. Psychoanalytic work shows us every day that translation of this kind is possible. In order that this should come about, the person under analysis must overcome certain resistances, the same resistances as those which earlier made the material concerned into something repressed by rejecting it from the conscious. And this is nice because he quickly he says that what was repressed cannot become conscious, and this can be sometimes puzzling because in some text Freud says that he speaks in a way that you could make the unconscious what was repressed conscious, but here he states clearly that it must remain unconscious and you can only reach it through detours. So yeah, chapter 1. Justification for the concept of the unconscious. Our right to assume the existence of something mental that is unconscious and to employ that assumption for the purposes of scientific work is disputed in many quarters. To this we can reply that our assumption of the unconscious is necessary and legitimate, and that we possess numerous proofs of its existence. It is necessary because the data of consciousness have a very large numbers of gaps in them. Both in healthy and in sick people, psychical acts often occur which can be explained only by presupposing other acts, of which, nevertheless, consciousness affords no evidence. These not only include parapraxis and dreams in healthy people, and everything described as a psychical symptom or an obsession in the sick. Our most personal daily experience acquaints us with ideas that come into our head we do not know from where, and with intellectual conclusions arrived at we do not know how. All these conscious acts remain disconnected and unintelligible if we insist upon claiming that every mental act that occurs in us must also necessarily be experienced by us through consciousness. On the other hand, they fall into a demonstrable connection if we interpolate between them the unconscious acts which we have inferred. A gain in meaning is a perfectly justifiable ground for going beyond the limits of direct experience. When, in addition, it turns out that the assumption of there being an unconscious enables us to construct a successful procedure by which we can exert an effective influence upon the course of conscious processes, this success will have given us an incontrovertible proof of the existence of what we have assumed. This being so, we must adopt the position that to require that whatever goes on in the mind must also be known to consciousness is to make an untenable claim. And if you want to interject at any moment, then just go, but I will continue.
Yes, thank you. I will.
Okie dokie. We can go further and argue, in support of there being an unconscious psychical state, that at any given moment consciousness includes only a small content. So that the greater part of what we call conscious knowledge must in any case be, for very considerable periods of time, in a state of latency. That is to say, of being psychically unconscious. When all our latent memories are taken into consideration, it becomes totally incomprehensible how the existence of the unconscious can be denied. But here, we encounter the objection that these latent recollections can no longer be described as psychical, but that they correspond to residuals of somatic processes, from which what is psychical can once more arise. Okay, let me highlight this. The obvious answer to this is that a latent memory is, on the contrary, an unquestionable residuum of a psychical process. But it is more important to realize clearly that this objection is based on the equation, not, it is true, explicitly stated, but taken as axiomatic, of what is conscious with what is mental. This equation is either a petitio principii, which begs the question whether everything that in psychical is also necessarily conscious, or else it is a matter of convention, of nomenclature. In this latter case, it is, of course, like any other convention, not open to refutation. The question remains, however, whether the convention is so expedient that we are bound to adopt it. To this we may reply that the conventional equation of the psychical with the conscious is totally inexpedient. It disrupts psychical continuities, plunges us into the insoluble difficulties of psychophysical parallelism, is open to the reproach that for no obvious reason it overestimates the part played by consciousness, and that it forces us prematurely to abandon the field of psychological research without being able to offer us any compensation from other fields.
Okay. What did he just say?
What did he say? It's so weird reading this text after knowing about Freud for like 20 years from like the common sense, because basically, and I understand this in a way that, and you can interject me at any moment if you want. This distinction it's also found in philosophy of mind. Like, if I do something, like for example, let's say that I move my hand and do something to like I grab someone, but I am not conscious of it. I just realize after, maybe not grab, but I lightly touch someone, and I don't realize this in the moment, and I totally didn't intend it. Like, one philosopher would say, your body moved, but you as a psyche, as a subject, didn't do it. Like, your body moved, like somatically. And another philosopher will say that, yeah, you did intend it, but precisely it wasn't on this level of like normal intention, which you like before the fact you plan for it. Okay, we are back. We had like technical difficulties, and we don't have them anymore, I hope. So
It was the lemurs, man.
it was the fucking Nickland remorse, man. They come when you least expect them. I don't know. Well, it wouldn't make sense if they came when you expect them, but I guess.
They sent you a card first, and then they say,
Yeah. Okay, so Rudi, you said like we read this paragraph, and I basically said that he is questioning this principle which says that if your intention is not conscious, but your body moves, so in a sense your body acts, then one philosopher would say that, like the philosopher who is much more focused on the conscious, and I guess this would be everyone before Descartes, maybe even later, they would say that your body moved but you didn't act. And like I think Freud is saying that this is not a justifier. It is not something we should take for granted that this is an obvious principle at all.
Yeah, but I wanted to get a little bit more basic even, because what is this line of reasoning? This equation is either a petitio principii, which begs the question whether everything that in psychical is also necessarily conscious, or else it is a matter of convention, of nomenclature. In this later case, it is of course, like any other convention, not open to refutation. The question remains, however, whether the convention is so expedient that we are bound to adopt it. To this, we may reply that the conventional equation of the psychical with the conscious is totally inexpedient. It disrupts psychical continuities, plunges us into the insoluble difficulties of psychophysical parallelism, is open to the reproach that for no obvious reason it overestimates the part played by consciousness, and that it forces us prematurely to abandon the field of psychological research without being able to offer us any compensation from other fields. So isn't he also saying that to say everything psychical is necessarily conscious does not account for what he referred to earlier, like parapraxis, dreams, why the fuck is this happening? Why can the conscious not account, or like structurally, why can we not structurally account for unconscious processes? Yeah, okay, that makes it clearer for me.
No, but this is like a nice, I think going to basic is good, is very good, because it's pretty outstanding. Like he's basically bashing. He's saying that in experience, what you encounter goes so, like in the clinic, goes so counter to this assumption that this is basically like if you were an astronomer and you were trying to study the movements of the stars, and like a guy with a Chinese astrology book came to you and told you that this is like this assumption of like Chinese astrology is expedient for, and you cannot deviate from it because this would make no sense. And if you do, then you are, and he's saying like this is basically like this assumption that what is psychical must be conscious is basically has a similar status, that like pragmatically it's because, and it's fun. It's he's saying that it stops the explanation, and I think this is like very, because if you cannot explain something consciously, then it would go like, okay, this is a, and maybe this is like very prevalent nowadays in, I'm not sure in psychology, but you would go like this, these are processes, like neuronal processes, and they are in a sense like physical, that you can scrutinize them with like statistics, mathematics, like this kind of research, but you cannot really, on the level of idea, you cannot go any deeper. Like not in a way that we create ideas like philosophically, but you must go through the method of like quantitative, like empirical, but empirical in the sense that you are trying to get at neurons or something like that.
Yeah, like biological essentialism is in a sense, right? Not like in the transgender turf debate sense, but in the sense of like every process or like every structure that we have is necessarily biological, and so it has a positivistic relation to biology because it's like these things actually make sense. I'm thinking about um, how neurobiology makes sense of dreams, that they are like, okay, there's excess amount in the brain, and the brain has in a sense to like act out for a bit. Um, and then the container is empty again. I'm giving a very simplified account of neurobiology right now, but I think it's kind of along those lines, right?
In the sense that, yeah, in the sense that, and it's so weird because after you know some things about like what Freud is saying, then it really is like, because at the point at which he's publishing this, so this is like 1915, I think, like after he publishes it, it is like, how could, and I mean this is still prevalent after 100 years, like thinking that like dreams, for example, that they are basically this epiphenomena of like exactly like the container is full, like needs to discharge, so we get, and what we get like on the level of the dream is like the post product, that this is simply how we experience these physical processes or something. But his claim is not so, it's not so radical when you think about it, that the idea can it, like the ideas connect without consciousness like being like without us being conscious at every moment. And like how could this escape people for like 2000 years to like
Maybe they needed like the history of science, of medical science, in a sense. Maybe they needed Marx first to kind of get that like symptom, like to even um, with this like alienation, something can be misrecognized. Uh, I think it's already there in Hegel maybe, but Marx really points it out where you like it's not the same as in Freud when Marx speaks about fetishism, but it's still doing this. You can misperceive something. And I thought about dreams. No, first, so I think this question of like why did they not get it? I think the answer to that is usually because they didn't get it. Like we can speculate about it, but it's like, yeah, okay, but maybe it was just contingent. It didn't happen. Uh,
yeah, it is contingent, but also like there were a lot of guys and girls, I guess, and like maybe this is like this connection to Marx is definitely something, because like what he's, I guess, what he's saying is that like there are some, there are things which like determine us without us ever realizing it. And maybe he is like, Hegel also has this, but I think in Marx is like more pronounced, that like, because this is like a big, like I think this is not a breakthrough on the level of maybe like it is a theoretical breakthrough, but also it is a breakthrough on the level of like ego, in the sense that like it really hits you hard that you are not, you are we are not like in control of everything that goes around in our heads. And
but
this is a
we,
disturbing
we could,
idea.
yeah, but maybe it's also like maybe it starts even with Kant. That it's like noumena are already things beyond your grasp. And maybe we could say, maybe this is also a stupid idea, but maybe we could also say that like the whole movement of continental philosophy from that point on was also circling around this idea. Why is there an outside to myself that is still um, affecting me, but not in the sense that it's separated from me, but it is in a weird, iffy way connected to me. And this is, I think, one of the questions of like, why is this connected to me somehow? And to relate this back to dreams, um, I think with this, what I call positivist notion right now, that there's a function. in the sense it's very functional. Then the question is, but why, first of all, why do dreams also kind of make sense? Yeah, why do they? And I think this points to, in Freudian terms, why are they invested with libido? Why do I wake up and feel like this was a fucked up dream? I just dreamt about someone wanted me to be the president of the USA, but I could not do it. You know, like, why is it not just super fractal? It doesn't matter. I see some colors, like on a trip.
Yeah, it's a good point that we really care. And, like we always did. But like the ancients went through this detour of like the gods, and maybe like Jung went through cosmological like ideas, and and like we care so much. Maybe we care so much that we had to go through this, like that it must come from the outside somehow, because like this makes it less like personally invested. It is a message from the gods. It's not that I'm talking to myself, like.
Yeah, then it's symbolic. You know, you have a symbolic relation to it, to the dream.
Mm. In
There
what?
is an outside entity that relates to me through a symbol, um, and I'm not alone with it. You know, in the sense that I'm like my dream is always my own.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's go on. Uh,
Do you want to continue?
I can do it. If you want, you can also. Go.
Okay, then let me read for a bit.
Yeah, yeah.
And one last thing, maybe the thing about Kant is interesting to keep in mind because I know that this is maybe a challenge that's kind of iffy, like on wobbly legs, but that people said, okay, so Freud made the unconscious the noumena, which is maybe interesting to keep in the back of our heads, of our minds for this reading.
Nice, nice.
Okay, here goes again. It is clear in any case that this question, whether the latent states of mental life, whose existence is undeniable, are to be conceived of a conscious mental states or as conceived of, no, let me again, are to be conceived of as conscious mental states or as physical ones, threatens to resolve itself into a verbal dispute. We shall therefore be better advised to focus our attention on what we know with certainty of the nature of these debatable states. As far as their physical characteristics are concerned, they are totally inaccessible to us. No physiological concept or chemical process can give us any notion of their nature. On the other hand, we know for certain that they have abundant points of contact with conscious mental processes. With the help of a certain amount of work, they can be transformed into or replaced by conscious mental processes and all the categories which we employ to describe conscious mental acts, such as ideas, purposes, resolutions, and so on, can be applied to them. Indeed, we are obliged to say of some of these latent states that the only respect in which they differ from conscious ones is precisely in the absence of consciousness. Thus we shall not hesitate to treat them as objects of psychological research and to deal with them in the most intimate connection with conscious mental acts. The stubborn denial of a psychical character to latent mental acts is accounted for by the circumstance that most of the phenomena concerned have not been the subject of study outside psychoanalysis. Anyone who is ignorant of pathological facts, who regards the parapraxis of normal people as accidental, and who is content with the old saw that dreams are froth, Träume sind Schäume, has only to ignore a few more problems of the psychology of consciousness in order to spare himself any need to assume an unconscious mental activity. Incidentally, even before the time of psychoanalysis, hypnotic experiments, and especially post-hypnotic suggestion, had tangibly demonstrated the existence and mode of operation of the mental unconscious. And when he speaks about latent mental acts, that's for him like parapraxis, or am I getting that wrong?
I think parapraxis are connected in the sense that, like when you have a slip of the tongue, it could be connected to a latent idea. It doesn't have to, and this is a point which I got like pretty late. That like not every sleep is a Freudian sleep. Like maybe not even like most sleeps. Sometimes you just have a parapraxis and it is a result of like things sound similar and it's like you fuck up. But sometimes it is connected to the latent idea and this can be reviewed in analysis or if it repeats like or something like this. Yeah, but basically a parapraxis is like a realization of a latent idea in an act.
And latent mental acts, we could also think of, I think like the point about negation, Verneinung, where it's like, okay, for everyone who has not known the story, this is one of the basic stories to get negation is an analysand of Freud is telling a dream and dreams about a woman, and the analysand is like, yeah, I know what you think, but the mother, it is not. And then Freud is like, yes, but why is the mother appearing and from where is she appearing? Why are we talking about your mother right now? Where is this idea coming from? And this would also be a latent mental act, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting in this paper is that in Verneinung is that he says that you shouldn't go and assume that it is the mother. Like the content of what you say, like well, it's the mother, la la la. Not that important, but the negation itself is like the hallmark of how the latent idea can appear in consciousness. So he says no, and it could be the mother, it could not be the mother, but there is probably something there because Freud didn't ask him. That's the thing. Like yeah, he negated
Yeah,
out of nowhere.
yeah. Why do you? What is your libidinal investment in negating, right? Like, why do you have to? Like, what do you gain, or like, not you, but like, why is this negation even happening in the first place? What do you
Exactly.
get out of it, or your unconscious, or like your whole psychical structure?
Exactly, I'm interested in the maybe it's a thing of translation of this text, but unconscious mental acts. I don't know if maybe this is in the original. I haven't I
I
don't.
have it open, and I will check it right now.
Oh, cool. That's cool because he he speaks about unconscious like representatives of ideas, but he doesn't talk about repressed mental acts in other texts, or I didn't notice. So maybe Stretchy just translated in this way, but I don't know.
Okay. And you mean, like, what is your question? Because I think I have the paragraph.
Is it in German also repressed mental acts or unconscious mental acts?
He's speaking about latent, yes, it's an act. It's actually latent soul acts or souli acts, if I translate it literally. He's like referring to the soul, seelische. But in German, it's a little bit frickly, because um, he doesn't use mental. I think this is exactly because he did not have, like, he was operating under this term of soul, but exactly to get at the point that there's this is not something supernatural necessarily.
Oh, so he uses the word soul, but in German this is, well, this sounds freaky in German, like not normal, or
For that time, no.
okay.
Like,
Maybe he wanted to use like a unique word or something.
maybe let me check if, and then you had like with, because he was um yeah, because it's like mental life or psychological life. Sometimes for him it's Seelenleben, which is like soul life. And if he speaks about the unconscious, he writes unconscious, latent states of the soul life.
That is something. I, I I'm not weirded out that they didn't translate it this way because this would sound like yeah, but okay. It's the same that they don't. There's a translation of the phenomenology of spirit which goes like phenomenology of mind, because like it's too traumatic for the Anglo-Saxons to hear like spiritual
Just
language.
to think about spirit.
Yeah.
But the connection is there, you know, like in German, Christian text in German, they also speak about the soul.
Hmm.
Freud is not deviating from this. I think he just put something different inside.
Oh, so they in this milieu they use this term
In
like
Christianity, yes,
hmm.
they say like your yeah, it's the Seele.
Hmm.
The
Okay.
soul is the Seele.
It is still an interesting choice of like a term, I guess.
I agree.
And I also I get this. He's really like trying to justify it because he's like this paragraph when he says that hypnosis also demonstrated that there are these ideas, and this is a very, to me it's like a very risky move because like in but it's maybe from today's perspective that like hypnosis doesn't sound like but something legit, but I guess I don't know. Let's go on.
Okay, I keep reading for a bit. The assumption of an unconscious is, moreover, a perfectly legitimate one, inasmuch as in postulating it, we are not departing a single step from our customary and generally accepted mode of thinking. Consciousness makes each of us aware only of his own states of mind. That other people too possess a consciousness is an inference which we draw by analogy from their observable utterances and actions, in order to make this behavior of theirs intelligible to us. It would not, no doubt, be psychologically more correct to put it in this way, that without any special reflection, we attribute to everyone else our own constitution, and therefore our consciousness as well. And this identification is a sine qua non of our understanding. This inference or this identification was formally extended by the ego to other human beings, to animals, plants, inanimate objects, and to the world at large, and proved serviceable so long as their similarity to the individual ego was overwhelmingly great. But it became more untrustworthy in proportion as the difference between the ego and these others widened. Today, our critical judgment is already in doubt on the question of consciousness in animals. We refuse to admit it in plants, and we regard the assumption of its existence in inanimate matter as mysticism. But even where the original inclination to identification has withstood criticism, that is, when the others are our fellow man, the assumption of a consciousness in them rests upon an inference and cannot share the immediate certainty which we have of our own consciousness.
Let's let's take a break. What is he saying? Because what I heard was that like he's basically trying to diminish the importance of consciousness, or like trying to critically assess the tendency we have to like attribute consciousness everywhere. So like,
Yes.
and he says consciousness makes each of us aware only of his own states of mind, that other people to possess a consciousness is an inference, okay, which serves to make their behavior intelligible. It would be psychologically more correct to put it this way, that without any special reflection we attribute to everyone else our own constitution, and so consciousness. So we do this move where we try to make sense of the behavior of the other, and this other could be like maybe even the world at large at some stage of human development, and like we attribute consciousness, maybe a kid or like a savage to put it in Freudian terms would attribute consciousness even to like trees, and he's basically
A kid or a savage. Yeah, I get what you mean.
yeah like in Freudianese. Okay, makes sense.
I think it's also like, I don't know if he's aware of it, but he also adds something to the Cartesian doubt, because he says like, okay, so you have your ego, um, but there is an other to this ego. And so is this other, can you actually doubt this other ego in the way you doubt yourself? No, you cannot. You have to infer that they do the same thing.
Yeah, and I wonder where he is going with this. And I don't know if he continues this.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Psychoanalysis demands nothing more than that we should apply this process of inference to ourselves also, a proceeding to which, it is true, we are not constitutionally inclined. If we do this, we must say, all the acts and manifestations which I notice in myself and do not know how to link up with the rest of my mental life must be judged as if they belonged to someone else. They are to be explained by a mental life ascribed to this other person. Furthermore, experience shows that we understand very well how to interpret in other people, that is, how to fit into their chain of mental events, the same acts which we refuse to acknowledge as being mental in ourselves. Okay, this sentence is Let me say it again, because that's interesting. Furthermore, experience shows that we understand very well how to interpret in other people, that is, how to fit into their chain of mental events, the same acts which we refuse to acknowledge as being mental in ourselves. Here, some special hindrance evidently deflects our investigations from our own self and prevents our obtaining a true knowledge of it. It sounds a little bit weird, the last part, and prevents our obtaining, maybe there's an off missing, and prevents our obtaining of a true knowledge of it.
This move is very nice. Uh, it's almost like, and he always does this, and like, there's a paper, the universal, it's a mouthful, like the universal tendency to debasement in the sphere of love. Basically, it's about like how we hate the people, we don't want to fuck the people we love, and we love the people who we don't want to fuck. And I said the same thing, but whatever. And he says that like this applies to people who were frustrated sexually when they were young, and he speaks as if this was like outside to the reader and to Freud, and then he says that like no, this is everyone, this is universal, and like is this move from like it's outside of you, like we attribute consciousness everywhere, and maybe it's not, and we know that it's not in the trees and in animals we doubt it, and la la la, and like, but it's also inside of you, like why do you assume that there isn't, that you are conscious? And it's a funny move because it's almost like maybe not topological, but it's like he asks you to imagine the mind as a container. I mean, I think about this when I read this, that like the mind is a container of stuff, and like why do you assume that all stuff is visible? That all of this stuff is visible?
Yeah. And he also makes the case, like on a very basic, like the very basic reading is that he saying it's very easy to see other people as crazy. You know, like it's like you can more easily you can say about like maybe let's take like a guy you don't like. You can very easily say, yeah, this guy he's always sabotaging himself. And
Yeah,
you
and he
but it's
cannot
way
see
way
it.
harder. Yeah. Why can he not see it?
Yeah, it's so true. It's like the point is so simple that like we exclude ourselves all the time. Like your friend, you can see his emotions that he cannot see, and like you can, maybe it's fake, but you can infer what he is feeling, and he obviously isn't aware of it. And like it's so hard to do it for yourself. It's almost impossible without help, precisely like without another person.
I think if you read this, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think if you read this very closely, you can already kind of get at desire is the desire of the other from Lacan. It's like implicitly, it's already there that you have to do this detour via the other, and that it's way harder to.
Because what like in Lacan, desire is unconscious. Like I heard it from someone, and I like immediately thought that this is true. Every time Lacan says desire, he means unconscious desire. So this desire would be precisely, you can see this, you can see the other's desire, like how he is acting. You can see that he is acting in a way that some desire is unknown to him, like what is guiding him. And like, and when you I have some friends who have like very large egos, and I love the guy, but like he's all the time he's talking about how he's like how he has these plans and how he's acting and all the reasons. And in action, it's so obvious that it's not it. Like, and this is like this thing that desire is desire of the other. Maybe precisely because in the other we can see the desire and like we can copy it,
Or we can infer it maybe
infer it.
also,
Yeah.
you know. But really, like desire is unconscious? That kind of breaks my mind right now.
You
I
can
always thought it's like both at the same time, that it's split, that there's an
from what I understand from like Lacan and like from Todd McGowan, how he talks about it, and I like it. Like desire is what can sometimes desire can be made conscious. Like you can encounter the desire, like the gaze. I don't know if you, but like you have the object of desire, and sometimes you can encounter it, and it's anxiety provoking. Like when because you can precisely see your desire, and it's like to for a long period of if you were to be exposed to it for a longer period of time, it would be unbearable basically. But like you can grasp it, but usually it's unconscious. And these desires which Lacan talks about, they are unconscious. Like the Oedipus complex, there's a desire for the mother, it's fully unconscious. Like,
yeah, that's true. Okay, that's that I see.
and but it's a great point because when people talk about psychoanalysis, you can almost sometimes be like, you forget that it's about the unconscious, because desire, we use this word like to describe conscious states all the time, and like, yeah, one has to check oneself sometimes.
Mhm.
Okay, let me go on.
Mhm.
Uh, this process of inference, when applied to oneself in spite of internal opposition, does not, however, lead to the disclosure of an unconscious. It leads logically to the assumption of another, second consciousness, which is united in oneself with the consciousness one knows. But at this point, certain criticisms may fairly be made. In the first place, a consciousness of which its own possessor knows nothing is something very different from a consciousness belonging to another person. And it is questionable whether such a consciousness, lacking as it does its most important characteristic, deserves any discussion at all. Those who have resisted the assumption of an unconscious psychical are not likely to be ready to exchange it for an unconscious consciousness. In the second place, analysis shows that the different latent mental processes inferred by us enjoy a high degree of mutual independence, as though they had no connection with one another and knew nothing of one another. We must be prepared, if so, to assume the existence in us not only of a second consciousness, but of a third, fourth, perhaps of an unlimited number of states of consciousness, all unknown to us and to one another. In the third place, and this is the most weighty argument of all, we have to take into the account the fact that analytic investigation reveals some of these latent processes as having characteristics and peculiarities which seem alien to us, or even incredible, and which run directly counter to the attributes of consciousness with which we are familiar. Thus we have grounds for modifying our inference about ourselves and saying that what is proved is not the existence of a second consciousness in us, but the existence of psychical acts which lack consciousness. We shall also be right in rejecting the term subconsciousness as incorrect and misleading. Pew 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 pew.
He just outright says it.
It's amazing. Everyone didn't read this passage, man.
Like what part of there is a part of psycho, or am I misinformed? There is a part of psychoanalysis where they emphasize subconsciousness sometimes, right?
I have no idea. Maybe. I'm not so familiar with all of the different like schools.
I
But
know that
like,
in deep psychology, like in psychology, ego psychology, they do it. They speak about subconscious all the time.
okay. It's fine if you are not a Freudian, but like, he just says it. He said it, guys. It's right here on the page 2994 of the Freud complete works, man. We should just print it out and like place it in the middle of the city. Oh my, that's amazing. Okay, let me end it and then we can let me read the last word on this last sentence. The well-known cases of double conscience, splitting of consciousness, the French term for dual consciousness, okay, splitting of consciousness, prove nothing against our view. We may most aptly describe them as cases of a splitting of the mental activities into two groups and say that that the same consciousness turns to one or the other of these groups alternately. It's a nice, like Freud is really something because this is and this is present in like some, like Philip K. Dick has this like short story, not short story, it's a book. It's called Scanner Darkly, and like in it the main hero has this basically a split of consciousness. So he's a cop during during the day, let's say, and he's a junkie during the night, and like this argument that we have splits in our ideas, it's a nice, because you could say like this argument that like, okay, so maybe we have, and Sam Harris also has this argument somewhere that like, we don't know, maybe we have 3 million consciousnesses in our heads and like they suffer sometimes and something like this. And this emphasis that okay, this is valid, this is not a stupid argument, but this mental ideas, like acts which we uncover, they don't seem to possess like the same, they and he says characteristics, but like they function according to different rules. I think with what this will be later like reformulated as this by Lacan, that they don't connect in a rational way, like yeah.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about Scanner Darkly is there in that story, he's not sure at some point. Like if he's even more split, if like because he is a junkie and I think doesn't he at some point even as a cop do drugs?
Yeah,
So in a weird sense, it's like um, they kind of mirror each other. So he always has unaccounted time, and then he's not sure if he's like his girlfriend, I think, at some point, and all these weird merging
yeah,
situations.
yeah, and sometimes they overlap, I think. So sometimes he is basically conscious that he is an undercover cop, but sometimes he's not. And this is like the twist that like at sometimes he is just a junkie. I
Oh,
don't remember so well.
Philip
Actually,
K. Dick is a great paranoid guy. Like he wrote, that's a great, amazing story. Um,
I think it's a good thing that he didn't actually probably read Freud, because if he did, then we would get like he, he would be like unsure of himself, like, am I getting this right? Is this
yeah, no, he should never have done it. Um, but I think like it would be interesting to think about if Freud, even in this text, because maybe he does that with like this unlimited number of consciousness, how he deals with it. Because maybe it can go counter to this Kantian noumena thing, like how he quilts it, like how will he um, wrap this up? Because if this was true, then ultimately his project would be doomed to fail from the start, right? If it's like turtles on turtles on turtles, and you try to do psychoanalysis and to get a structural account of this conscious, or like this whole structure of consciousness, psychic apparatus, mental activity, whatever, soul life he calls in German, um, then if he, in some sense, if he never could get at the bottom of it, um, you know what I mean? Like that
Yeah, I know what infinite regress, like,
yeah.
and
If it would be infinite, then how the fuck do you reach the end of infinity?
and this is also a problem in like with the German idealists. They have to make this argument that there is a level at which consciousness is not transparent to itself, because you have to have a stopping point. And I also thought that, okay, Mr. Freud, like, it's a good argument that that the unconscious has to be qualitatively different, but why not two consciousnesses and the unconscious, or like something like this? And I think he basically dismisses it with saying that, like, okay, but unconscious consciousness is like a contradiction in terms, because you have a consciousness which lacks its like predicate. But you have this phenomenon, like precisely the splitting of the ego. So if you perform lobotomy, like one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. But I think in this case it's also a single consciousness, but you simply have two egos in it. So like they can speak to you only like side by side. Like one side can speak about this, another can speak about this. But I don't know if you could make an argument that it's two consciousnesses.
I
I'm not
think it necessarily cannot be. I mean, if I think about like what is it called? Usually people misattribute it as schizophrenia, but it's actually split personality disorder, which is very rare. Um, isn't it like that these egos or personas, whatever you want to call them? I know that there are some people who have split personality disorder who actually try to alters, I think they sometimes also call them. Um, you can never, if if I remember correctly, you can never talk to two at the same time, but you always can only like they can shift very fast, um, but you can never encounter dual egos in one consciousness.
Hmm. Chalmers also has this argument in his. He's basically precisely trying to argue that, like, if you would have one mind with two consciousnesses, then do you really have, like, they precisely what you said, that they would have to switch very quickly, and at which point do they merge? But I don't remember the argument very well. Well, let's maybe go on.
Yeah. Do you want to continue?
Oh no, take it, man, if you want.
In psychoanalysis, there is no choice for us but to assert that mental processes are in themselves unconscious, and to linken the perception of them by means of consciousness to the perception of the external world by means of the sense organs. We can even hope to gain fresh knowledge from the comparison. The psychoanalytic assumption of unconscious mental activity appears to us, on the one hand, as a further expansion of the primitive animism which caused us to see copies of our own consciousness all around us, and, on the other hand, as an extension of the corrections undertaken by Kant of our views on external perception. Just as Kant warned us not to overlook the fact that our perceptions are subjectively conditioned and must not be regarded as identical with what is perceived, though unknowable, So psychoanalysis warns us not to equate perceptions by means of consciousness with the conscious mental processes which are their object. Mhm. Like the physical, the psychical is not necessarily in reality what it appears to us to be. We shall be glad to learn, however, that the correction of internal perception will turn out not to offer such great difficulties as the correction of external perception, that internal objects are less unknowable than the external world.
That's a
Dun,
controversial.
dun.
Yeah, that's a controversial claim, I guess. The part about the animism is like this assumption of unconscious mental activity appears as a further expansion of the primitive animism which caused us to see copies of our own consciousness all around us. I don't understand what he means.
Um, as a further expansion, does he mean like okay, so okay, there's a consciousness and there's an unconsciousness, or an unconscious. There's a conscious and a unconscious, and he's saying like um, you could assume that this is just an inversion, you know, like my unconscious works exactly like my conscious, but they are just um,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
you know, like I think he's talking about like how do they function, and that it appears like there is what he exactly refuted earlier, that he said like there's no subconscious.
Okay, so you're saying that he means that like this could be taken as saying that there are things which are conscious but which are not. Okay, so like animism that I attribute consciousness, but he says psychoanalytic assumption of unconscious mental activity. So that's why I'm confused because it sounds like he's saying that the legitimate postulate appears as an animism. Maybe maybe it's a badly phrased sentence, but
Let
okay.
me check it in the German. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay, oh, I found something interesting too, but this is another point.
No, go if it's interesting, then
Yeah, but I want to first unlock this animism stuff.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think he means that it is the same sentence. It's not so far off.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
as a further expansion of the primitive animism, which caused us to see copies of our own consciousness all around us. Yeah, but isn't he kind of say saying, okay, this appears to us as magic force inside of us.
Aha. Okay, so like to us that it's like the us as a common sense.
Yeah, yeah, like the unconscious is just like um, a spirit within you which does things to you,
Okay. Like a substance, like yeah, like something which does funky things to me.
but it appears as such, which is always in.
Okay.
As a German, I can attest to if something appears, it is not neither ontic nor ontological.
Yeah.
It's something else.
So he's
It's an
basically assuming the most like critical reader that like
I think
okay.
because I think we started talking about Kant, and he's saying the name outright.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I can fuck with that. It's okay.
And the other thing is, we shall be glad to learn, however, that the correction of internal perception will turn out not to offer such great difficulties as the correction of external perception, that internal objects are less unknowable than the external world. At the German it is,
Uh-huh.
okay, I will give a literal translation and a quick one, but I will try to be as precise as I can. We will therefore, with pleasure, prepare ourselves for the experience that the correction of the inner perception is not offering up as great a resistance as the external, and that is that the inner object is as unperceptible as the outside world.
It's different.
Yeah,
Oh.
minder unerkennbar. It's like he does a weird thing there in German, which is funny when you read him in German. But it's also older German.
So he's saying in German that it's as unknowable or like as knowable as the external world.
This is what I try to find out right now.
Okay. There is also this point which is like he's saying that these ideas he said that they are consciously directly like unachievable, and now he's saying that they are achievable in the same way as through perception you can achieve knowledge of the external things.
I think he is kind of he's hinting at it's not in German, it's not actual like minder unerkennbar is not like as unknowable, but this is one of the closest, almost as unknowable. This would be a better translation, I think.
Okay.
But minder is a weird word in German, um, because it's like it could be less, it could be more.
Okay. Oh, that's not.
Still in
Okay.
relation to it, like
Oh, I know the formula. We have these formulas in Polish. Like,
yeah, okay. Then
yeah.
the Americans and Anglosphere, they will not get.
Well, what can you do?
Sorry,
Like,
guys.
in
We
Polish we
tried our
say less
best.
more. Like, it makes sense, but like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's less more, and it's like it depends on the context, um, how you use it, that it changes. Like less more can change depending on what you uh, connected to in German.
But then the sentence is very weird, like the whole sentence, because he's saying that with pleasure we announce that it will be not as difficult because they are like almost as. Maybe this is the point that they are almost as unknowable, but like, yeah, okay.
I think he says like, "Hey man, we cannot see what's out there. We cannot really know." I take Kant seriously in some way right now. There are perception is changing how we perceive things, and it's the same with your insights.
Okay, so
Take
like,
that.
yeah.
Descartes, take that.
Yeah,
Like
like like we know that we cannot know for sure, but we kind of know. So like, if the internal phenomena are similar, then it means that we kind of can know. Okay.
but
Yeah.
also not know blah blah blah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Oh, it makes sense.
I think about the soul, why he uses the term soul, is, and I remember that this blew my mind kind of, because small things sometimes blew my mind. Psyche, in German, is translated usually to soul or mood. Like the old Greek term psyche is translated to this. So Freud is basically saying every time he says psychoanalysis, he says soul analysis. Therefore, because the psyche is the soul.
Whoa, that's dope, man. Soul analysis.
Yeah, sounds this sounds kind of like an anime thing to me.
Yeah, and no wonder they didn't translate it like this. Like you
No,
can
no,
go to a psychiatrist or to your soul analyst.
he did the same. He also wrote in German. He writes Psychoanalyse, but it is the same term.
Okay.
That's why he has no problem. Every time he says psyche, he can also say soul life.
Oh wow, German is nice. Like, what can I say? Wow. Yeah, I guess like. Hmm. Oh no, I thought I had a point, but I don't. Let's
What
do.
I
No, yeah, okay.
One more point, because this is what blew my mind kind of. That in a sense he said, okay, and I don't know if Freud actually coined the term psychology, but he at least he takes it, and therefore he takes this stance that there is even a science, quote unquote, for that which cannot be known, which
Hmm.
is the soul. The soul is always like immaterial, bodiless, blah blah blah.
No, I don't think he coined this. I think psychology was like half a century before Freud, but yeah, and for sure the root of the term is like soul, knowledge about the soul. So like, oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
and Christian Wolff was one guy who used this term, but he used it differently. In German, there's actually, I think, because this is important, because this really is something. Psyche, it has so many translations. It's soul, spirit, heart, mood, courage, conviction, um, uh, mental ability, as well as um, uh, gasp, no, wisp, breath, life, life force, soul, spirit, mood.
Wow. Why? I wonder. Like, what went like historically there? Maybe this is like the fruit of like medieval philosophy.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think it is along the lines of like Christian theology,
Hmm.
kind of taking um, antique, like classical philosophy serious, but kind of not also, like
You know, uh, maybe this is like a stretch, but I always wondered why were there like maybe German language really allowed for like this speculative thought because this happened. So like they took antiquity, they had good good translations and stuff, and so you get these speculative words which mean so many things and which allow you to basically switch in between certain concepts, like certain ideas.
I think this is why Hegel liked so much to take colloquial terms for his philosophy, which all of these terms that he uses, they were around when he did his philosophy. People really talk like this.
That's based. Because now, if you want to talk philosophy like 21st century philosophy, you basically sound like an alien sometimes. And
Or you just say based.
and you know what I realized? That we are at the edge of the first. We just ended the first subsection, and I think we could end because I have to go in like 10 minutes. So I don't know if we want to start the next one.
That's a bummer. No, yet let's end here for now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did 5 pages, which is, I think this is like a nice pace, and yeah.
I would add for anyone, I know that we all try to refer to a shared milieu, but I also think we're not there yet. So for anyone who just goes into this code, when we referred to Lacan, he's not a direct student of Freud, I think. I think he never studied under Freud, but he is like one string, like one path in psychoanalysis, one school of psychoanalysis is Lacanian, and he was the guy who claimed that he remained Freudian his whole life, but he also tried to do a return to Freud, which means reading Freud, I think, more conceptually and less biological deterministic, which is maybe also a misreading in general.
Yeah, he basically took Freud and combined him with like linguistics and philosophy from 20th century, and like in philosophy in general, because Freud was like, he refers to Kant, but he wasn't that read in philosophers. Like Lacan was read in everyone. So yeah,
Yes.
that was a great idea to say this, because yeah. Okay, so
And
I will end the recording and let's.
maybe we say one more like closing, or
Okay.
do we have any closing thoughts, or don't we?
Uh, you know, the text was very clear, and I think that like this was a nice introductory one, and like later probably we'll get into more propositions from him. So yeah.
I am not to this day. This is still a question I come always back to. That I really tarry with the um, aspect that I'm not sure if the unconscious is a noumena.
Oh.
Is like maybe that's complete bullshit and easy to refutate, whatever the term is. Yeah. What do you think?
That's a good question, actually. I'm not sure what I think. Like the noumenon, in a sense, they are not. They are the same, but the thing about I think the difference is that you can describe, like the unconscious. Lacan says that it's not ontological; it doesn't exist, and in this sense, it is close to the noumenon because it also doesn't exist. But Kant explicitly says that you cannot say anything about the noumenon. Then he does say things about it, but this was controversial. And like, you can describe the laws of motion of the unconscious, and in this sense, I think it is different. That like we can know, like we cannot access it directly, but as he said on this page, there's a great. Like, we can liken the perception of these unconscious mental acts by means of consciousness to the perception of the external world by means of sense organs. So like we can know the effects of the unconscious processes, I think, in a more direct way, because you can posit the noumenon, but it must be there. But like you can know the direct effects of the unconscious.
Yeah, and when we go to which we have not read today, but when we go to negation, there I think it's implicitly, maybe Freud is not even aware, but implicitly it's dialectical. Because like something necessarily comes from something else. Like the idea with the outer world, the Außenwelt, the external world, and the Innenwelt, the internal world, which is made by this mythical moment, which is important for anyone listening. Mythical means we cannot pinpoint when it happens, but it necessarily had to happen in some sense. That the baby takes something inside its mouth, and does it want to keep it outside or inside?
Ah, you mean primal repression?
Yeah, but this is connected to Verneinung, right? To negation. You have to negate.
This is a nice point that in this sense it is similar to noumena, that it's like a mythical positing. Like, yeah, I get your point that formally it is very similar. Like you have these things like this is an event which must have taken place, but we cannot locate it empirically, but we have to posit it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm still not so sure because if I hystericize myself, if I problematize it, I'm always like, okay, but maybe there's a part that I'm missing, like about the mythical moment. Um, I don't know, yeah.
I like there is also this difference that is like Freud doesn't talk about, I don't know if he says it's mythical, but like Kant would not say that noumenon is mythical. Like he would be like, no, this is like a not a concept, but like yeah, it's by reason, and like Freud and Lacan, like Lacan says explicitly that this is not, this is a myth in the sense that it's trying to say something which is not sayable, which is like
And we have to keep in mind that Freud is doing clinical work. I think this happens, and it's important methodological to separate between people doing Freudian philosophy and Freud not trying to make ontological statements.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
only
yeah.
referring to what he sees coming up like phenomena in the clinic, where he's like, okay, what the fuck? How do I make sense of this? These people are suffering. How do I help them?
Yeah. But he cannot help but make ontological claims in the sense. We talked about this previously outside the recording that like you can make this, you can try to limit this to the clinic, but like you cannot help but make universal claims sometimes.
If you'd say something about the human condition, you
Yeah.
also say something about the world.
Yeah, but I think I got this nice idea, like the when we like that the unconscious is in a sense like a singular noumena, that everyone has this singular noumena, but also then comes this problem that like the unconscious is not inside, but it is singular. I think that like you have you have an unconscious which is not inside you, it is outside you, but it is singular, like your unconscious.
But then it kind of also becomes like God. And maybe this is not a problem. But then there is some merit to the criticism to say like, okay, so now we have inscribed a new God. He's not external to us, but he's he's ruling over us from within.
Yeah, but maybe this is not not such a stretch, because Lacan has this formula that like we have to think God as unconscious, but he doesn't mean this that like unconscious is like a God here, like but like it's not a God in. But why do you say it's like a God? That's interesting to me.
Um, because we are, if it's mythical, so we can never completely reach it. We can never completely make sense of it, but it still rules over us.
Okay, I know what I'm thinking, because and he mentioned this, and I think this is important, that like these unconscious acts, they are not in any sense like continuous, and like they do, it's not like the unconscious is like precisely this thing which controls you, in the sense it doesn't even control itself. This is like a nice point, that the unconscious is like it does its thing, but precisely it doesn't have any like intention with a big I, that like
Yeah,
it,
yeah, I
yeah.
get it. But you know, like if I um yeah, but maybe it's a chaotic god. Like a mad god who does not know
He
himself and
doesn't
it's
know what
like
he does. Yeah, yeah,
it's
that
just
maybe,
chaos.
maybe. Yeah, but like this is a controversial claim, that like God would be like this.
I'm associating right now, you know, like this is free form.
No, but this Lacan's idea, I think, like this, his formula that like you have to think God as unconscious. Maybe it is connected. That like the only, if you want to treat the unconscious as a god, then it is this mad god, in the sense that not he's like mad, but he doesn't even know what he's doing. And in this sense, you cannot say that like your unconscious made you do something, because it didn't.
This is exactly what Freud. Okay, this is a great, I think, point to end. Maybe if you don't want to add something, because this is what maybe Freud meant when he writes. So it appears to us like the primitive animistic, you know, like just copying yourself, because the mad god is not a god in the theological sense, but in the like animistic sense, a spirit.
Mm. Oh, okay.
Because I think like the monotheistic gods and to some extent also the polytheistic gods, they know themselves. Like the Christian God knows himself through and through. Um, but the unconscious doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
exactly the opposite.
And like maybe this is also what why he says that like we have this immediate resistance to the idea that there are these processes, because it's kind of anxiety producing idea that you have this intentionality inside of you, which is like not in the vague sense of like you have inspiration, some humors inside of you, like yeah, but like precisely thoughts, so like acts which are inside you, that this is like a very disturbing idea. And like he's not saying that this is like this, like he's saying that there are these disconnected acts which like we can make sense of them, but like who knows, what goes on in there at this point in the text. Actually,
Who knows?
maybe he will say it all in the like the in the next few pages. I guess he will.
Okay. Hey, Łukasz, thank you so much for your time and for this reading.
Yeah, thanks, Rudi, and so we'll stop here and we'll continue this in the next. I will stop the OBS.